Today I want to share why Canadians apologize even when nothing happened, and what this quiet habit reveals about everyday life in Canada. In many social settings across Canada, an apology can surface in moments where no clear mistake has occurred. A stranger brushes past in a narrow aisle. Two people reach for the same door handle, or a brief silence interrupts a conversation. Almost instinctively, someone will say sorry, not as an admission of fault, but as a form of social lubrication. To outsiders, this habit can feel excessive or even confusing. To Canadians themselves, it is often barely noticeable, woven so deeply into everyday interaction that it functions more like punctuation than confession. Early impressions of Canadian life frequently include this quiet politeness. Public spaces tend to feel orderly, voices are measured, and interpersonal friction appears softened at the edges. Apologies emerge less in moments of wrongdoing and more in moments of shared space. They fill the small gaps where human paths intersect. Rather than escalating tension, they gently dissolve it before it has time to form. This creates an atmosphere that feels calm, cooperative, and emotionally restrained, even in crowded or stressful environments. Beneath this habit lies a broader cultural preference for social harmony. Canadian society has long emphasized coexistence across differences regional, linguistic, and cultural. In such an environment, maintaining smooth interactions becomes a collective priority. The apology serves as a low-cost signal of goodwill. It reassures others that no confrontation is intended, no boundary has been crossed with hostility, and no ego needs defending. The word itself carries less weight than in many other cultures. It is not always tied to blame, but to awareness. This pattern is reinforced from an early age. Children are taught to be considerate, to anticipate how their actions might affect others, and to resolve minor tensions quickly. Over time, apologizing becomes less about evaluating responsibility and more about acknowledging presence. It says, in effect, that another person has been noticed and respected, even when nothing objectively happened. The apology marks the moment as shared rather than isolating. In everyday interactions, this behavior appears almost reflexive. Someone might apologize for asking a question, for taking up time, or for expressing uncertainty. These apologies rarely invite correction or reassurance. They pass unchallenged because everyone understands their function. They are not requests for forgiveness, but signals of modesty and emotional restraint. By minimizing themselves, Canadians often aim to keep the social temperature low and predictable. Over time, this constant softening of interaction shapes the emotional climate of daily life. Conversations feel less confrontational, disagreements are often indirect, and public behavior leans toward caution rather than assertion. The apology becomes less a statement about the past and more a tool for managing the present. It keeps encounters brief, polite, and emotionally contained, reflecting a culture that values ease over intensity and quiet understanding over overt expression. This tendency also shapes how responsibility is interpreted. In many Canadian contexts, saying sorry does not automatically imply guilt or liability. It often functions as an expression of empathy rather than accountability. When someone apologizes for a delay caused by weather, traffic, or systems beyond personal control, the intent is rarely to accept blame. Instead, it signals recognition of inconvenience and an alignment with the other person's experience. The emotional message matters more than the factual one. Legal and institutional frameworks have even adapted to this cultural habit. In several Canadian provinces, apology legislation clarifies that sorry cannot be used as an admission of fault in court. This formal recognition reflects how deeply ingrained the behavior is. Lawmakers understood that apologies were too culturally automatic to be treated as confessions. What elsewhere might be a risky statement is, in Canada, a routine social reflex. This creates an interesting contrast in communication style. Direct confrontation is often softened or delayed, while apologies appear early and frequently. Discomfort is managed preemptively, sometimes before it fully exists. In group settings, this can lead to an atmosphere where people tread carefully around one another, prioritizing emotional safety over blunt clarity. The apology becomes a buffer, absorbing minor tensions before they become visible. At the same time, this habit can confuse those unfamiliar with it. Visitors and newcomers sometimes misinterpret frequent apologies as insecurity, passivity, or excessive deference. They may respond with reassurance that no offense was taken, unaware that none was assumed. The mismatch can create brief moments of awkwardness, where intentions are kind on both sides, but framed differently. Over time, many come to recognize the apology not as weakness, but as a shared cultural shorthand. In professional environments, the pattern continues in subtle ways. Emails often open with apologies for brevity or potential inconvenience. Requests are framed carefully, softened, polite qualifiers. Feedback may be preceded by an apology, even when it is constructive or necessary. These habits help maintain a collaborative tone, but they can also blur the line between courtesy and hesitation, especially in fast-paced or competitive settings. Emotionally, constant apologizing contributes to a sense of social calm. Interactions feel less charged, less likely to escalate. There is comfort in knowing that small missteps will be smoothed over quickly, often without discussion. Yet this same calm can make strong emotions harder to express openly. Frustration, disagreement, or urgency may be diluted by politeness, leaving underlying issues unspoken for longer periods. In this way, the Canadian apology operates as both shield and glue. It protects individuals from conflict while binding social interactions together through mutual consideration. Its power lies not in the word itself, but in the shared understanding behind it. A collective agreement that maintaining harmony is worth a few extra sorries. Even when nothing has technically gone wrong, this pattern influences how Canadians perceive themselves within social spaces. The frequent use of apologies reinforces an identity built around consideration, restraint, and emotional awareness. Rather than asserting dominance or clarity through volume or certainty, communication often leans toward signaling safety. The apology quietly communicates that no one intends to take up more space than necessary. It becomes a way of sharing responsibility for the comfort of the moment, even when responsibility is abstract. This cultural habit is especially visible in public life. Crowded transit systems, busy sidewalks, and shared facilities operate with relatively low levels of open conflict. Apologies appear at moments of interruption or inconvenience, smoothing interactions between strangers who will never meet again. These brief exchanges rarely develop into conversation, yet they establish a fleeting sense of mutual respect. The apology acts as a social acknowledgement that each person's presence matters, even in passing. In emotional terms, this creates a landscape where friction is minimized but not eliminated. The absence of overt conflict does not necessarily mean the absence of disagreement. Instead, disagreement often remains subdued, expressed through pauses, indirect language, or quiet withdrawal rather than confrontation. The apology plays a role in maintaining this balance, helping interactions end politely even when underlying tensions remain unresolved. Culturally, this behavior reflects a broader preference for predictability and emotional moderation. Extreme reactions, whether positive or negative, are often softened. Apologies serve as a stabilizing force, returning interactions to neutral ground. In this sense, they are less about correcting the past and more about protecting the immediate social atmosphere. The goal is not resolution, but continuity. For those who grow accustomed to this rhythm, the apology becomes almost invisible. It is no longer heard as a word with meaning, but as a signal that the social system is functioning as expected. Only when contrasted with cultures that prioritize directness or assertiveness does its uniqueness become clear. What seems excessive from the outside often feels essential from within. Ultimately, the Canadian tendency to apologize when nothing happened reveals less about insecurity and more about collective values. It points to a society that prioritizes emotional ease, shared space, and quiet cooperation. The apology is not a sign that something went wrong, but that something delicate is being preserved. In that preservation lies a subtle cultural philosophy, that everyday life runs more smoothly when people acknowledge one another gently, even in moments that barely register as events at all.